the last couple of weeks and this week, our first reading comes to us from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. And the way this letter is structured is it's divided into 5 different topics or questions that the Corinthian community was struggling with. So we heard about last week how there were lots of divisions. Preachers would come and people in Corinth would say, "Oh, I belong to that preacher," or "I like that preacher, I belong to his church." And Paul responded by saying, "No, we're all one in Christ. Christ is what unites us." Topic 2, which we've been hearing about this week, is that there were all sorts of sexual immorality that was happening in Corinth. And Paul says, look, we haven't received the Spirit to do whatever we want, but Christ was raised in a body. And so too we have been raised through baptism in a body. So our bodies are meant to glorify God. The third topic, which we're in the middle of today, is a little more bizarre to us, a little more different from our cultural context. And what's happening is in the pagan temples, there was meat being sacrificed to the different gods. And so we heard about yesterday, Paul was saying, look, there are lots of gods, right? Little g, people, according to the world. But Paul said there's only one God. And Paul comes up with an interesting solution to this problem. He says, look, this is good meat, and meat is rare in the ancient world. So Paul says, if someone is watching you who is not a Christian, then you shouldn't eat it. If no one is watching you, you can feel free to eat the meat. Sounds a little hypocritical, but what Paul is saying is, look, meat is meat. And what most matters is the witness that we give to Christ, what we are and who we are for others. And so we don't do something in this instance and not something in this instance. Paul says we're motivated by love for each other, by love for our brother, and our desire should be to bring that person closer to Christ. So Paul in our first reading today says, look, that's the reason for everything we do. It should be for Christ. And he gives this great analogy as he says, look at runners. You know, people who have prepared for races. We're in cross-country season, right? Shout out to all the cross-country runners out there. Or people who run 5K, like the Corey Brown Memorial 5K tomorrow. Or people who train for marathons. They do all sorts of things. Paul says, be like them. Don't run around aimlessly. Don't be like chickens with your head cut off. I love that analogy and that image of those two totally different images. But isn't it the case, myself included, that sometimes we feel like we are chickens with our heads cut off? That we're running around in all different directions, that we feel pulled in lots of different ways. But Paul says, remember what the goal is. Remember that the goal is to be like Christ, to be Christ in the world. So, today, and as you are in the midst of a situation in your life, all of us have different situations that we're encountering. As we are in the midst of that situation, how is Christ inviting you not to run around aimlessly, but to be reminded again of what the goal is, to fix your eyes on Christ so that everything else can be put back in the proper perspective?